Shabbat Shalom on this Parshat, Mishpatim. Shabbat Mishpatim, as I noted before, has the 53 mitzvot, 53 commandments as we commonly know them to be. And I'm going to be concentrating on one of those mitzvot this morning. Our Parsha begins with the following. Ve'ela hamishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. These are the laws which you shall set before them. So this is Yah speaking to Moshe. Of course, talking about Moshe being the tzinor, being the holy conduit, to let the people know what's going to be expected of us then and now. Notice that the name of this week's Parsha is again one of the words in the opening pasuk, in the opening line, Mishpatim. Ve'eleha Mishpatim. These are the laws. And we're going to be taking a finer look at one of these commandments, one of these mitzvot, because as we know, Yah is in the details. There are 23 positive mitzvot and 30 negative mitzvot in our parsha. Among them, the laws of the Hebrew slave, not to strike a father or mother. That's one of my faves. Not to verbally oppress a convert to Judaism. Lending to the poor is covered, as is not to demand payment of a debt from a poor man who does not have the means to pay. Not to eat from a non-kosher animal, an animal that is treif. And the meaning of that in ancient days was an animal from whom one of the limbs was torn off while it was still living. Resting on Shabbat, very, very important. We just sang about that. It's a good thing to God, Tov l'hodot l'Adonai, for us to be resting, unloading a burden from another's animal. In other words, if your camel happens to have a lot of stuff on it, your neighbor should come and help you to take some of the load off of that camel. I know that happens to many of you every day, and a judge should not take a bribe. This is some of the positive and negative mitzvot that are in our parsha. So now let's take a closer look at the word mitzvah. You all know the word mitzvah, bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, son or daughter of the commandments. Well, this word actually means, yes, commandment. This is the do's and don'ts. But let's look at it a little bit closer, because the word mitzvah has its origin in an Aramaic word. And that word is tzavta. I'm not talking about Renee, who is a savta, or Judith, who is a savta, or many of us are grandparents, and grandmothers in this case, but the word is tzavta with a tzadi. So mitzvah is linguistically connected to this Aramaic word savta, which means connection or attachment or joining, highlighting the relational aspect. So in other words, these mitzvot which we are given so that we have the means, the spiritual tools to return again and again and again, to attach ourselves, to connect ourselves to divinity, to each other, and equally as important, to ourselves. Now, here is the pasuk that we're going to take a look at this morning. V'chiyigach shur et ish o et isha v'amat. If an ox, a shur, gores a man or a woman, and that man and or woman die, Sakol yisakel hashor, the ox shall be surely stoned to death. V'lo yachel et basaro, you should not eat its meat, its flesh. Uva'al hashor naki, and the owner of the ox is not to be punished. All right, my friends, raise your hand. How many of your oxen have gored anyone lately? Okay, well, my point exactly. No one's. As a matter of fact, we can't always be responsible for our stuff to begin with, whether they're oxen or camels or the direction I'm going to. But what if the ox does not belong to you? Let's illustrate that from a movie that many of you have seen, loved, and enjoyed for a very, very long time. And I'm talking about none other than Peter Sellers as the Pink Panther.
Does your dog bite? Oh? Oh. Nice doggy. I thought you said your dog did not bite.
That is not my dog.
Okay, that is classic, is it not? It is not my dog, so I shouldn't be responsible for the fact that it's biting you. I think the Pink Panther is onto something here in relationship to our Parsha. So now, okay. The question is, does your ox good? Does your ox good? Of course, that's not my ox. I don't have an ox. Now, what if your car hits somebody? That's a horse of a different color. Listen, we don't own oxen. So how might this mitzvah that is used or that is fulfilled in order to make us more holy so that we have greater connection, again, to ourselves, to each other, and to divinity? Let's take a look. Maybe we'll get a hint of this from the Mehashiloach, Rabbi Mordechai Yosef Lehner of Ishbitz, more lovingly known as the Ishbitzer Rabbi. Now, the Ishbitzer Rabbi, let me tell you a little bit something about him. He didn't live so long ago, 1801 to 1854. And he was somewhat controversial in his time. Perhaps in a similar way as Reb Zalman of blessed memory is controversial in his time. Why might that be? Because the Meshiloach emphasized that a person's inner, honest intention is more crucial than rigid outward adherence to law. That gets a hand of applause from Rabbi Devorah Lin. You could see why this might have gotten him trouble with all the Mitnagdim, with those Lithuanians and others who believed that in order to be an authentic Jew, you needed to fulfill all of the commandments, all 653 of them, 611, 613. I got it. 613 of them. Yes, let's not pay attention to the fact that not all of them can be fulfilled anymore, but okay, we'll let that go. But you could see how he might have gotten in trouble. Basically what he's saying, listen, what you do is more important than your ritual life. You know, when you're praying all those prayers, you really should be living up to them. He argues that everything, including human actions, is ultimately under God's direct control. That, as you have heard me say before, is called hashgacha pratit, right? The mashgiach, he's at your event. The mashgiach is overlooking the kashrut, the kosherness of the event. That's the person who overlooks to see, if the restaurant or the kosher supermarket is living up to its kashrut standards. But wait a second. Everything is under God's control? Also, a radical but an ancient understanding as well. Let's get back, because I promised you. Wait a second. I have to put it in here. You can see this was New Age Hasidism. That's what it was understood at the time. Maybe we could have called it Renewal Judaism. New Age? It was called that back then? Interesting. All right, let's get back to the pasuk. V'chiyigach shur et ish o et isha. If an ox should gore a man or woman, here's what the Ishbitzer teaches. HaTorah melamedet otanu ad chen tzarich adam lekadesh l'tahor et atzmo. The Torah teaches us to the degree to which a person must make themselves sacred and pure. Okay. That's so far so good. That's what the mitzvot are for. But then he goes on to say, and a measure of our moral goodness needs to be that we continue and extend goodness over our possessions. Drive carefully, right? Use what you own for the good in a moral way. Be sure that misfortune or injury should not be the result of them for any human. As you're driving your scooter down my sidewalk, you should be careful of me because you shouldn't be driving that bicycle or scooter down the sidewalk. How many of you have almost been hit by someone's bicycle or scooter while you're walking down the street? The Ishbitz is basically making this point. Rabbi Mark Asher Goodman, he shares that we can have greater assurance that our possessions move through the world as we ourselves aspire to move. You are what you own. That's a different way of looking at things. Creating connection, taking little from others, and treading gently on the earth. I must add a little editorial comment at this time. This also includes the fact that this past week, Renee and I have canceled our Washington Post subscription. And we also intend not to renew our Prime subscription as well at the end of the year. We have been trying not to shop at Target. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. But that we live our lives and we also purchase things from companies that also have moral integrity. Can we ask for nothing less? And so, my sweet friends, on this Shabbat Mishpatim, may we come to see our possessions as extensions of our moral and ethical lives and act accordingly to each other with dignity and fairness. Shabbat Shalom.